The U.S. has always been a symbol of financial strength, but now things are changing. President Trump's surprise tariffs are shaking the markets. Stocks, bonds, and even the dollar are all falling at the same time. What does it mean? Some experts say the world is starting to lose trust in America's financial future, and that's a big deal. Why are investors worried? For many years, investors all over the world trusted the U.S. with their money. They believed that U.S. markets were safe and that the government would always protect their investments. But now, Trump's new tariffs and sudden decisions are making people nervous. On April 2nd, Trump announced massive tariffs on many countries. The news shocked investors. Stock markets crashed, and fears of a global recession grew quickly. What makes this market crash unusual? When something bad happens, investors usually sell their stocks, but they often move their money into safer places, like U.S. government bonds or the U.S. dollar. These are seen as very reliable. But this time, something strange happened. Stocks fell. Bonds also dropped. Even the dollar weakened. That's very rare in a big economy like the U.S. It usually happens in smaller or less stable countries. Experts say it could mean that investors are losing trust in all parts of the American system. Why is trust in the U.S. so important? The U.S. economy depends on foreign investors. These investors buy U.S. government bonds, basically, lending money to the government. In return, they get interest payments. This is how the U.S. pays for many things, even when it runs a deficit. Right now, foreign investors hold more than $8 trillion in U.S. debt. That's a huge amount. If they stop buying or start selling, the U.S. would need to pay higher interest rates to borrow money. That would make everything more expensive, from building roads to paying military costs. Are Trump's other actions making things worse? Yes. Tariffs are not the only thing shaking investor confidence. In just a few months, Trump has fired several top officials without clear reasons, talked about buying Greenland, said Canada should be America's 51st state, questioned long-standing global alliances. These actions seem strange and unpredictable. Investors don't like surprises. They prefer stable, clear leadership, especially when it comes to money. Trump's style is the opposite. Why is the bond market falling? U.S. Treasury bonds are usually safe, but when investors see the president making risky moves, they start to worry that even these bonds could lose value. That's what's happening now. Some believe this is similar to the Nixon shock in the 1970s, when President Nixon cut the link between the dollar and gold. That move changed the global economy forever. Now, Trump's actions could be the next big shock. What role does China play in this? China is a big player in this story. Despite political tensions, China owns more than $750 billion in U.S. bonds, the second largest holder after Japan. This bond buying helps both countries. But if China decides to stop buying U.S. bonds, or worse, sell them quickly, it could crash the market. It would be like taking the floor out from under the American economy. So far, China hasn't done this, but many fear that it might, especially as the trade war with the U.S. gets worse. Are other countries getting involved? Yes. Other countries are also nervous. They rely on both the U.S. and China for trade. Southeast Asian nations, for example, don't want to take sides, but Trump's pressure is forcing them to make hard choices. Some countries like Japan and Indonesia are trying to make new trade deals with the U.S., but they're also worried about losing China as a partner. This adds more confusion to the global market. Is this really the start of a recession? Not yet, but it could be. A recession is when the economy shrinks for at least 2 quarters in a row. Right now, we're seeing warning signs: falling stock prices, less investment, and nervous banks. If this continues, companies might stop hiring. People might spend less. Businesses might close. That's how a recession starts. and Trump's tariffs might be the trigger. Why can't experts agree on what's happening? The financial world is complex. Every day, hundreds of billions of dollars are traded. No one knows exactly who is buying or selling at every moment. Experts use delayed data and try to guess what it means. That's why opinions vary. Some say the current drop is just a short-term panic. Others believe it's a long-term change, showing that global investors are starting to look for safer places than the U.S. What are U.S. officials saying? U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says there's no big reason to worry. He claims foreign investors are not selling in large numbers. He also says China is not trying to crash the U.S. market. But many analysts disagree. They say the damage is already happening slowly but surely, and it will take a long time to fix. What happens next? No one knows for sure. The markets may calm down if Trump changes course or reaches new trade deals. But if he keeps using tariffs as a weapon, the global economy could enter dangerous territory. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's lost, and right now, the world is watching to see whether the U.S. can remain the leader of the financial world or if it's starting to fall behind.